And let me also, got it? Thank you. Right, and let me also welcome Rachel to Kenton, or maybe more accurately, I should say to re-welcome Rachel to Kenton, because not only has Rachel spoken at a number of Kenton functions over the years, but of course, she also grew up in Kenton, which is really the point of this evening's meeting anyway. But before we get to all of that, I'd like to just give you a few words of introduction. The publicity material for tonight tells us about Rachel's current occupation as a London Blue Badge tourist guide. And I know that there are many of us on the call who have been entertained and interested and stimulated by Rachel's tours. In fact, you need to move very quickly if you want to book one of Rachel's tours. They get sold out pretty quickly. And it's almost as difficult to get a place on Rachel's tours as it is to get a season ticket at Old Trafford, well, for the moment anyway. Anyway, enough of this. Rachel, it may surprise you to know, hasn't always been a tour guide. Before entering the world of the tour guides, she is a qualified librarian, and she worked as an information professional in financial services for over 25 years, and was indeed recognised by the industry with the Informational Professional of the Year award in 2006. Then her professional organisation awarded her a Membership Achievement Award in 2008. And when she's not working or guiding, she supports her local independent cinema, the Phoenix Cinema in East Finchley, where she was a trustee for over 20 years. Rachel is also a published author and has written some 5 books between between the years 2012 and 2019, as a number of books. And you may well know her book on Jewish London, which I've certainly used in various areas from time to time. And she also, the even better side to touring is that she gets to give talks on cruises. And she's been delighted, surprise, surprise, to have been able to do that since 2009. On a personal level, I've both enjoyed and gained a great deal from Rachel's training in my various volunteer pursuits. And believe me, this lady is, among other things, a total treasure trove of Anglo-Jewish history. If she doesn't know about it, it didn't happen. But enough of this. Let's get back to where we came in. Let's get back to Kenton, to the old days, and to the memories of Kenton. Rachel, it's time for the nostalgia fest to begin.
Okay, thank you, David. Thank you so much. And it was, just in case anybody doesn't know, it was David actually who thought of inviting me along. So if you find that the evening isn't what you expected, it's nothing to do with me. It's all to do with David. So in time-honoured Zooming, I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see my screen and hear me? That I just need if somebody put their thumb up or something. Brilliant. Thanks, the bugs. Brilliant thumbs. Okay, so thank you, David, for that lovely intro. The talk will last, to be quite honest, I can't remember asking, but it's going to last about an hour, but people do say time flies with me, but there you go. So you've got about an hour. Most of you, I've noticed I've recognised a lot of the names already as people have come in, and indeed some of you will be getting an honourable mention, whether they get a mention by name or whether they just see their photographs. I know there's a couple, at least one person on this photograph who's come in as a guest. What I really want to say before we begin is that I have got no idea what you are expecting to hear and what you're hoping to hear. All I know is what I am going to talk about, and I can only say in advance that, you know, everybody has different experiences from their childhood and their teenage years. They have different experiences, whether they're thinking about their school or their neighborhood, or in this instance, a shul and cheder. And these are very much my reminiscences. They're things that I remember. They're the things I've kept. David, thank you so much. I have spent the last month just going through the boxes I've found under the bed, boxes at the top of the cupboards. I mean, for goodness sake, Rachel, you know, what am I keeping? And finally, I find, you know what? I get invited to do a Zoom about my teenage years, and all these things I've been keeping for ages, I can use. So this photograph will crop up again, so I don't have to dwell on it too long. Hopefully you can all tell who I am. If you can't tell who I am, I really, please don't tell me, please don't tell me. But this was my Buck Heil. Although interestingly enough, I found out by looking at the everybody needs to be muted. Sorry. It's sort of helpful if you're muted, or if you're not muted to be mute, if you know what I mean. I noted actually from the Buck Heil that I did in 1971, they note in the book, the Kenton book, they called it Aish's Heil, but actually on my program it says Buck Heil. But I think that was there was a transition from calling it Aish's Heil to Buck Heil. But we'll come back to that photograph later. I do have a copy of this book. And what I've tried really hard to do for my talk is really not use it. And the reason I didn't really want to use it too much is because a lot of work went into this book, and there's no point in you inviting me along to talk if all I'm going to do is regurgitate the book that you know so well. But I did use it just to check up a couple of things like dates and everything like that. But I wanted you to know that I've got a copy. So let's just go back and just do a little bit of background, because it's actually quite important, particularly for somebody like me who actually came from the wrong side of Kenton. I came from Belmont, and I think this isn't a story about the Kenton community and how it developed and how Kenton developed, but I think it is quite interesting just to bear in mind a little bit of the geography. So this is a map of Harrow, and that arrow points to Belmont Station. You'll see photos of that later. So I was born in Kingsbury. Mummy and Daddy's first flat was in Kingsbury, but by the time they were going to have Betsy, they'd already moved to Belmont. So I was born in Kingsbury. We were already living in Belmont when my sister Betsy, who's on the Zoom, arrived. So we were in Belmont. The second arrow points to Kenton Station. And the third arrow points to Preston Road Station. And the big yellow arrow points to where Kenton Shaw is at the bottom of Shaftesbury Avenue. I know I don't have to tell you that. But what I think is interesting is the big red road just to the top of the yellow tip is Kenton Road, and the yellow road going from the yellow arrow down to my orange arrow is Kenton Lane. And you can see that there was this thing when you came out of Shaw, whether you turned left or whether you turned right, and we turned left, but most other people turned right because they were going into the Preston Road, Wembley Park area. And it's quite interesting actually, because when you think about people that went to Kenton Shaw, where they lived was a little bit more of Wembley rather than Kenton. Or Kenton proper, and certainly Belmont was something altogether very different. And I was quite shocked to find, this is on a website talking about Kenton, the history of Kenton, and shock horror, Belmont is actually outside the area they consider to be Kenton. So really my whole life is actually rendered, it's been a whole fraud. I don't come from Kenton at all. I'm not quite sure what Belmont where Belmont was designated, but there we have Belmont, Kenton, Preston Road, and the Shawl, and you can see there a very, very clear demarcation area. And I would wager that most people that went to Kenton Shawl was in the Kenton Preston Road area. And I think it's important to remember, though, for families like myself who lived in Belmont, there wasn't Belmont Shawl. Belmont Shawl didn't really establish itself until the mid-1960s, and it didn't get its sort of, what's the word? It's building until the early 1980s. And if you think about it, if you got married and you've had the kids and the kids have gone through Hader and this, that, and the other, you're typically not going to change your shawl. Although I have to say that in Mummy's later years, Mummy did actually go to Belmont Shawl because you could see it was just so much closer to her, and she couldn't walk, bless her. I mean, she couldn't do the walk, but she could just about walk to Kenton, to Belmont. And by the way, Daddy was going to Notting Hill, so we were a really curious Kenton family. Another reason, actually, why it's a whole fraudulent talk that I'm giving this morning, this evening. I don't even know what time of day it is, but there you are. I'm so excited about going back in time. And this is where we lived. And, I could just talk about Kenton Shaw, this and other, but you've got to have context. I'm a firm believer in context, because if I only mentioned Kenton Shaw, that would mean that you'd think that was all in my life. Well, this 182, so the house over to the left-hand side, was our lovely little modest semi-detached house on Kings Hill Drive. We did not have the loft conversion windows, and the newer owners have now put a porch outside, and it looks so ghastly. I can't even bring myself to show you the photograph. And there's Mummy and Daddy. And I should say very quickly that Ma and Pa, it was very important for them to encourage my sister and me to go to Shaw and to go to Khaida, which is like, seemed interminable. But they didn't really have time. Neither of them were really involved with the Shaw. So as I'm sure you're all aware. So whereas there are sort of dynastic families in Kenton, people who really worked tirelessly on the communal side of the Shaw administration, Ma and Pa weren't that side, although they were very supportive of the Shaw. Daddy was working and looking after his mum and dad, who both needed care, and Mummy was training to be a teacher when we were in our formative years, and then she taught, and that was quite intensive. And there's proof that I was once young with my sister, and we're outside. And of course, with the Crittall windows, those wonderful 1930s houses, sun-trap houses with Crittall windows, most of which have now been removed. Absolutely outrageous. But of course, Crittall windows were very difficult to maintain, seemed old-fashioned, so out they went. And this is how most people would remember me when I first started going to Kenton. This is me at Priestmead School, obviously, but I started going to Khaida at the age of 5, and I stayed there until 1974, until I was 15, nearly 16. I mean, that was really quite a marathon performance of going to Khaida, actually. And by the end, when I did leave, there was only about 3 girls of my age actually still at Khaida. I left it as late as I possibly could. And this was my school. Now, I want to show you the school. This is Priestmead. Now very sadly and outrageously very recently demolished, but Priestmead School, excuse me, was officially opened in 1936. And it's very important because 1930s buildings were very important to me in my formative years as a child in Kenton. Kenton as an area began to develop up near Northwick Circle and Kenton Station in early 1900s. And then in the interwar years, the area where I lived, of Kenton Lane, and then Hertford Avenue, Radstock Avenue, Kingshill Drive, Tenby Avenue, that was very much the interwar years. And once you had thousands and thousands of new residents in an area like Kenton, you had to have all the amenities. And a lot of them were built in the 1930s. I love 1930s architecture, and this is what I was brought up being surrounded by, and I just loved them. So here's beloved Priestmead School, where I went to school until 1969. And this is the entrance, what do you call it, register. And I'm the second one down. And I need to tell you that Priestmead School got both my first name and my surname spelt incorrectly. I mean, absolutely outrageous, but there you are. I only found this out when I went back for the 80th birthday. I left in 1969, and in 2019 my school had a reunion at the old school, literally a year before it was demolished. So this is the school leavers of 69 all getting together 50 years on. So they were very, very happy days. David mentioned that I'm a tour guide. One of my school reports at Priestmead said, well, apart from saying I'm not doing her best and I need to make more of a determined effort, it says, apart from a slight tendency to chatter, she is well behaved and cooperative in class. So even as a 10-year-old, my tendency to chatter had been noted by the very super Miss Ashcroft. Another 1930s building, which was absolutely pivotal to my history and my development, and something that's written through me like a stick of rock, is my love of film and cinema. And this was the Belmont Cinema, opened in 1939. By the time I came along, it was the Asoldo, and this is where I first started seeing films. Really, really important, because I sat in this cinema with Mummy seeing terrible films, and I just knew that's where I wanted to spend the rest of my life, in a cinema. It was demolished, closed in 67 and demolished, and when this Tesco opened, we thought it was the greatest thing ever. I mean, honestly, really, what did we know in the mid-1960s? But moving swiftly on. So the BP garage lasted a long time. The community hall has recently there's been a big battle to save it, and it's been saved. And I don't know, this is what I used to do at the community hall. I don't know, did anybody else do this? I wanted one of those miniature zebra crossings. I wanted the miniature Belisha Beacon. Does anybody remember where I was going in the early 60s? It was to the Tufty Club, so that was at Belmont as well. And this is what Belmont looks like today, Belmont Circle. Really a rather sad and sorry state, bless it, but it brings back happy memories for me. This is what it looked like in the heyday when we had lots and lots of shops. But again, what's interesting about Belmont, we never had any kosher shops. We never had any Jewish shops. All that was at Preston Road or on Kenton Road. It just didn't come. And even when Belmont Shul opened, we didn't have kosher food. We just didn't have Jewishy stuff at Belmont Circle. It never really took on. But we did have a station. And one of the reasons that Mummy and Daddy chose Belmont Circle to move to in 1959 is because we had the little branch line to Harrow, Wealdstone and Stanmore Village. It closed in 1964 after the Beaching Act of 1963. And when my sister and I weren't at Cheder or weren't at Shul, this is where we were playing. This looks like it's something out of like, Ken Loach film, from the 1970s or something, like up north. But this was actually the old railway before the whole area was cleared. And we used to go down to the old railway and play. So my life was either going to Shul, going to Cheder, going to school, or going down to the old railway. Well, actually, when you got a new pair of jeans, what we used to do, we got a new pair of jeans and we'd go to the old railway and we'd sort of slide around the old railway to sort of ruin the jeans to make them look a little bit more lived in. Yeah, I know. You had to make fun any way you could in those sad days of the 60s. And in 2009, I was on my way to work and I read my Metro and it says trip of a lifetime to Harrow. And Harrow, London Borough of Harrow, wanted everybody to come to Harrow and think of it as a tourist destination. And I'm looking at that picture because the Metro was taking the mickey out of it, you see, St. Lucia and the Maldives. And look at that. Wish you were here. Belmont Circle. I mean, how terrible is that? On the other hand, there's no such thing as bad publicity. Belmont Circle was in the Metro being read by millions and millions of people. Now, my other 1930s building, apart from the school and apart from the cinema, was the library. And this played a really important part in my life. I'm a librarian by profession. I spent 25 years as a librarian. This library was on my route to Shul. And in the days after, when I could go to Shul by myself and I'd leave home and say bye to Mummy and Daddy on Shabbat morning, I'd walk up to Shul. Every so often on the way up to Shul, I saw the library and I had to go in. I mean, I'd be honest with you, and I hope you won't be angry, but sometimes I never got to Shul. I went into this library and it's such a beautiful library. And I just got immersed in reading, whether it was the newspapers, the magazines, the books. And what can you say? Here's what it looked like. It's also, as I said, 1930s. Really, really important. They're all built by the same architects, by Middlesex County Council. I mean, look at those bookshelves. And look, I mean, this is a little bit before my time, but honestly, that is what I think a library should look like. Lots of side light and top lit as well. I mean, just absolutely classic. And it's considered one of the best interwar libraries existing in London today, in Kenton. Long may it last. And a couple of years ago, it had a refurbishment, and the refurbishment is stunning, where the architects have actually kept all the old original bookcases. The parquet flooring has been renovated. If you haven't been, please do visit. I mean, it just brings gladness to my heart to see a room like that. So on the days I made it to Shul, past the library, sometimes it was raining, sometimes it was raining and it was useful to go into the library because then it saved me getting very wet. That was my excuse and I'm sticking to it. I have to say, so you probably recognize the chap at the top. These two gentlemen were really important to my time at Kenton. The top gentleman is Rabbi Sora Harris. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, will recognize him. He was rabbi when I arrived at Kenton, when my parents arrived at Kenton. He came to Kenton very young. He was 22 in 1958, and he stayed until 1972. And during that time, the congregation at Kenton Shul went up from 100 to 1,200. I mean, absolutely amazing. I mean, people have differing views of Rabbi Harris. I mean, he did. I could tell you what he did to me before my junior syllabus when I was about to take my first public exam ever in 1970. He wasn't very kind, and I told him so because that's the kind of person I am. And then he apologized and he said, "Don't worry, Rachel, they won't try and trick you in the exam," because he tricked me, you see, and humiliated me in front of my class. But he thought he was being funny, but I didn't. And I've never forgotten it. And those of you who are teachers, you must never humiliate the students, particularly before they're about to give an exam. So sadly, Rabbi Harris, that's what I remember him for. But boy, was he important to Kenton. And he was, Kenton really was the flagship United Synagogue. Well, certainly those of us that went to Kenton thought it was the flagship United Synagogue in the 60s and into the mid 70s. So it stayed quite preeminent after he left. And then obviously, he went to St. John's Wood and then he went to South Africa. And the gentleman below, I upset him as well. Well, actually, Rabbi Harris upset me. I upset Mike Cohen. Michael Cohen, a Hebrew Jewish educator par excellence. I mean, honestly, really, he is absolutely beyond parallel in many, many ways. And he was headmaster of the Cheder for a time. We had Stefan Reif as headmaster for a time, and then Michael Cohen became headmaster. And I have to tell you, if you look online and find Mike Cohen's CV, he actually doesn't mention Kenton. I shouldn't really tell you that. It's quite upsetting. He doesn't mention Kenton when he was headmaster of the largest Cheder at the time. Anyway, I'll tell you why I upset him a little bit later on. I upset him because I really wasn't clever enough, but there you are. I mean, he didn't have a beard like that when he was, I can't find any photographs of him. I think there's a grainy one in the book, but not a lot of photographs of him around. And when we were at Cheder, the Kenton shul couldn't hold everybody. I mean, it was a huge Cheder. What was it, 500, 600 children? I mean, it was absolutely massive. And we used to go to Oxenden Manor. And I think this is quite interesting in retrospect, because I don't remember Oxenden Manor looking like that. What I do remember is Oxenden Manor. It's a weird thing. And when I found this photograph, that's what I remember, that little roadway going down to the school where you were dropped off to go to Cheder. And I remember Mike Cohen being there and everything. But what I realized retrospectively is how easy it was for us to go to Cheder on a Sunday morning to a school like this, because this school was built a year after Priestmead, my primary school, by the same architects. So we probably just thought we were going back to school. You know what I mean? Everything looked the same. And again, there was that great homogeneity of these 1930s suburbs where I don't know, wide spaces, lots of window, lots of light, lots of green. It really was they really were lovely places to live. Maybe I didn't think so at the time, but in retrospect, I do realize that. I found this, Cheder, Sunday morning. You weren't allowed to go to youth club or discos on a Sunday night if you hadn't been to Cheder. If you pretended that you had a tummy ache or a headache, Mummy would say, "That's no problem, darling, stay in bed, but you're not going out to this evening." Miraculously, we felt better. And then we used to have to go to Cheder Tuesday nights and Thursday nights as well, after school, which was hard labor. And this is from a series of cartoons depicting Anglo Jewry in 1980 by a cartoonist called Phineas May. It's in the Ben-Uri collection, and it's a skit on "When did you last see your father?" which is a painting in all art galleries, you can see. "When did you and your sister last attend Cheder? London Board of Jewish Religious Education." And it's very difficult to remember now, to think back, that, you went to school 5 days a week, but you went to Cheder 3 days a week, and you went to shul on a Shabbat. Like, when did we ever have any fun time? Well, as you'll find out, I actually never had any fun time. Rachel's childhood and adolescence was purely work and study. You'll need to have somebody else come back if you want to hear about going out with boys and having fun and all that kind of stuff. Because I realized when I was putting this together, I just worked and babysat and studied. So I'm sorry about that. You'll have to invite somebody back to do the fun side of being a teenager in Kenton. And this is from Karen Flaum. I'm sure many of you will know Karen. She sent me this, and it was about Kenton Youth Club and the fundraising for the youth centre. And I'm thinking, what's a knotneck? What's a knotneck? Is it like a nudnik, like a schmerel? What's a knotneck? And I was just about to email Karen to say, Karen, what is a knotneck? Is it somebody foolish or silly? And then I realized it's Kenton backwards. But as I said, I really wasn't part of the Kenton Youth Club at all. But the Kenton, the knotneck and the club aficionados did a lot of fundraising to build the Kenton Jewish Youth Club building across from the shore, and I did go there a lot to the building, maybe not always to the youth club. I did go to some things at the youth club, but I remember it was used for overflow services for the shore, obviously, but it was also where I went to 11th Kenton Brownies. Now I don't want to upset anybody again, but I went to 11th Kenton Brownies. I found it really difficult. We had to sit around this mushroom. This is Princess Anne at her brownies. I couldn't find one at Kenton Brownies. And everybody says to me, Rachel, it was a toadstool. I said, it might be a toadstool, but for me, it was a mushroom. And we had to sit around it and sing a song, and I just didn't get it. And then you had to get badges. And we had a pretend brown owl, a temporary brown owl. And however hard, every week I folded my clothes to get the clothes folding badge. And every week, this temporary brown owl said, well, Rachel, maybe next week, if you fold the clothes again, we can give you the clothes folding badge. And I just said to Mummy, you know, enough of sitting around a mushroom and folding clothes. So I'm really sorry. I loved being a pixie, but I didn't last long at Kenton 11th Brownies, but it was very, very successful, and they had to make a 12th Kenton Brownies as well. But of course, after I've left school, I go to left primary school, I had to go to secondary school, and I go to Harrow County School for Girls. And I was still going to Cheder on Sundays and on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Here I am. This is, I don't know, early 70s. I'll move. There were no famous girls at Harrow County. The only famous girl was Diane Abbott, and she became very famous, I think, for being a member of Parliament and for being on TV with Michael Portillo, who was at the Harrow County Boys School. But she is our only famous old girl. Moving swiftly on. And as we have taken this from Brenton Kilburn Times, sorry, very difficult to get photographs of schools now, for obvious reasons. And then as we continued going to Cheder, because we got older, we started going to St Gregory's, and my memory of going to St Gregory's was, one, the journey was that little bit shorter, and B, we used to have our Cheder classes with giant crosses on the walls, and I know it's just one of those things you remember, because we didn't bother covering them up or anything like that, but they were good days. And although I would say that most of the teachers were instantly forgettable, but the ones we loved. So there you go. And going to Cheder Tuesdays and Thursdays evening, we used to go after school, and this is a photograph that Karen sent me, because her dad was a caterer. So this is Karen's dad. Although it says Kingsbury, it's actually in Kenton Shaw's kitchen, because I think you still got them, those things, the doors that open up. And when we used to turn up for Cheder on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they knew we'd come straight from school. And so they would give us refreshments, inedible refreshments, I have to say. But fortunately, one of my friends, Claire, from school, lived right near Kenton Shaw. So I used to go to her and have her mum's homemade chocolate cake. So I didn't have to eat what Kenton Shaw provided, which were Bond's biscuits. Now, the Bond's biscuits in the early 70s, they were like soapy biscuits. I don't know if anybody ever remembers them. You took a biscuit out of the tin, they were in tins, and they had a sort of a soapy, I don't know, sort of like a soapy, filmy thing. I just don't get it. Anyway, they really were inedible, but they were Bonds. And of course, Bonds, it does go back a long time to the East End. I sometimes wonder whether they were giving us biscuits from the late 19th century at Kenton. But you know what? They did feed us, and it was all super duper in a way. And when I went up to my classroom, and I remember, because my first big exam at Kenton Hayter was junior syllabus 1970. That's how we talked in those days. What class are you in? Junior 1970 or junior 70. Some of you might have been in the similar kind of classes. We didn't have numbers. We were junior. We didn't have class numbers. We were junior 1970. But I used to take up Disco 45 to read during the class. Disco 45, if none of you remember, Karen Flam's also got a collection of her Disco 45s as well. I'm just snitching on Karen. And it's all the lyrics of the songs, like T-Rex and The Sweet and things like that. Anyway, when I was being taught junior 70, one of our teachers, David Krasner, and David Krasner was one of the greatest teachers. I don't know if anybody had Dave Krasner, so I'm just shouting out because I can only tell you the people that I remember. Dave Krasner was one of the greatest teachers ever. And he taught us how to daven because he was quite dati. And so if it was mincha time or Mariv time, he would force us in the nicest possible way to daven mincha or Mariv. And actually it was really, really important because you learn how to do the Amida. I mean, there were just things, if you learn them when you're, 11, 12, they stay with you forever, sort of. Sorry, Kraz, I'm a little bit rusty, but he really was. He became a doctor and now he lives in Israel. And I've only got one, report from my cheder, from Gwen Jaffe and Deborah Perlman. I have to be honest with you, I don't really remember Deborah Perlman very well, but Gwen Jaffe, she called me a steady and bright student who did very well. That's very nice. When I was 14, Gwen Jaffe was a superb teacher. Gwen Jaffe really was absolutely fantastic. The other lovely teacher I remember is Sharon Steinbock. Some of you might remember Sharon Steinbock, a lovely, lovely young lady and lovely teacher as well. But Gwen Jaffe stuck with us because we weren't easy students at cheder. And look, these are just a selection of my prizes. I think everybody that went to cheder got a prize, really, just for turning up. It has to be something like that, because look, these are just some of my prizes. And you get prizes for being second in class, third in class, turning up, making progress. Do you remember these ridiculous prizes for making progress? But, it made us feel important and clever. And here are some of my prizes. Look, 1967, I was 9, I came third. And I came second, I got a special prize. And then you see you've got prizes from Kenton District Synagogue Hebrew classes, known as cheder, and also from the London Board of Jewish Religious Education, senior. So then I was junior 1970 and I was senior 72. So that's what you need to ask people when you meet them if they came from Kenton and went to cheder. You have to, don't ask them what class they were in. I mean, it tells, because like I said, you didn't have a number, but you can see there, Mr. Canerick. I remember Mr. Canerick. He was so lovely. I don't really know what he did. He was chairman of the education committee, but I just remember him always being in shul on a Sunday morning for cheder. He was tall. He was always very well dressed, very dapper. And I just remember him as being a really nice man. Stefan Reif was just really serious and very, well, he is serious, isn't he? He's a top academic. I don't really remember much about him. Mike Cohen is the one we remember on the right-hand certificate, because he was so stylish. He was really, really stylish and not sort of academic in the same way that Mr. Reif was. Oh God, yeah, and I got more certificates as well. And look, I found them all. Thank you, David. Who keeps all these certificates? But on the other hand, you've got all these important people who were important at the time in Kenton, and you can see I won more prizes and special prizes and got distinction, all that kind of stuff. And then Kenton District Synagogue classes had prize giving as well. And this is sort of quite fun because, look, Paul Kuttner's here. Paul Kuttner, a senior pupil, will second the vote of thanks. Judith Bell, a senior pupil, will propose thanks to the guest of honor, who was like a Mr. Rubin, FCIS. Who was Mr. Rubin? The guest of honor, somebody will know. And then we've got Rabbi Harris. And then we've got all the teachers here. I don't remember hardly any of them, but you can see there, lovely Dave Krasner, Dee Krasner there. Oh, Leonard Tan. If anybody remembers Leonard Tan, he never taught me, but he was like bigger than, no, what do you call it? Bigger than life? What do you call it? Life? I can't remember. He was a real personality. And then more thanking everybody. And somebody else who was very important when you were young at Kenton was Jeffrey Blumenfeld. So if you were an older child and youth, like going to youth service, the two people you remember most, if you're my age, will be Paul Kuttner and Jeffrey Blumenfeld. Paul's here, so he's lovely. Paul, you're lovely. And Jeffrey Blumenfeld was also very, very lovely. And both of them worked tirelessly for the people of my generation. And then, of course, if you won lots of prizes from the London Board of Jewish Religious Education, you would go to the Adolf Tuck Hall at Woburn House. That name has now disappeared. This is now owned by the University of London, UCL, and this is where you'd go. And this is where I went in 1972 to get prizes. Now, what's interesting here, this is the pass list from the London Board of Jewish Religious Education, 1972, the Buck Heil certificate. These are all women, girls. Look at how many came from Kenton. 16 girls. We had the most number of girls from the London Board in 1972, having passed their Buck Heil. 16. No other shul came close. And of course, I got the Lady Edith Wolfson Prize for the Judaism in Practice paper, if you can believe that, everybody. I'm just very good at exams, actually. I'm just not very good at doing anything in practice, but there we have it. Now, what was the problem with going to the Adolf Tuck Hall at Woburn House to get my prize in the summer of 72? Shall I tell you what the problem was? This was the problem. This was the first Sunday there was a Wimbledon final on a Sunday because there'd been rain. So while we were stuck in the Adolf Tuck Hall receiving prizes, I actually won £25, which was a lot of money in 1972. Stan Smith was beating Ilya Nastasi in a 5-setter, and we couldn't watch it. Sorry, London Board. That is what I remember from 1972. But I was very proud to have won the prize. And Mummy and Daddy bought me a present for winning the Lady Edith Wharton Prize. They bought me a smock. I could have whatever I want. And I went and bought a smock from Etam. And I've still got the smock. I can't fit in it, but there it is. Real classic 1972 cheesecloth, which is basically discolored, because that's what cheesecloth. If it's vintage cheesecloth, it discolors, okay? If somebody's wearing cheesecloth and it's not discoloring, it's not the real thing. And here we have it. 1974, I got O-level classical Hebrew, and there's Mike Cohen. And here in Shalom, in 1974, 3 more successes for the Kenton Synagogue Hebrew classes. Anna Deborah Charin, grade A, Vicky Friedman and Rachel Kolsky all passed the London University Classical Hebrew O-level examination, my first O-level. Would you like to know what Mike Cohen, you need to know I've known Mike Cohen very, very well, and I have told him this to his face. Do you know what he said to me? I got an E, but I passed. Do you know what he said to me? He said, Rachel, I have never had an E before in any classical Hebrew O-level result. Now, this was a great thing for me to pass my classical Hebrew O-level, because I really wasn't very good. But I've told him what he said to me, and I'm not actually sure whether he ever spoke to me again, actually, but there you have it. Nobody can take away that I actually did get it. Now, what's this? This is my hat. This is the hat I wore to shul as a child. Why did I wear a hat to shul as a child? I don't know. I guess it's because Mummy wore a hat to shul and I wanted to be like a mini Mummy. And so this is my beret, and this is what I wore to Kenton shul, and I've still got it, and that says shul to me. And this is the Bat Heil, or Ashes Heil, from 1969. And the lady at the back there is Karen Flaum, or Karen Hacker, is her name. And the sad thing is this. We used to go to the youth service, obviously after the children's service. And I remember Karen very well from the youth service, but she says she doesn't remember me at all. You know what? It's fine. We're friends. I can say anything to Karen and she doesn't mind. She says anything back to me, but I do find it bad like that, because Karen was like large. That's what I was thinking about Leonard Tan, larger than life. Karen was also larger than life. And I remember her so well. It was just great. So this was Karen's Ashes Hall in 1969. And I'm sure several of you are busily Reva Gilbert is the lady in front of young lady in front of Rabbi Harris. Here she is in the same Shalom, because she was a member of Jives and she was Capital Radio's disc jockey. She was a disc jockey on Capital Radio because she did Northwick Park Radio. So she was really, really good at all of that kind of stuff. And here we have, coming up to me, 1971, my Bat Heil. So there you have it. And you have to get ready, don't you? To have to get ready. We went to Swan and Edgar for my dress and Saxones for my shoes. Just want you to know that's where my outfit came from. And thank you, the book, because in the great tome of Kenton Shaw, when they had to choose Bat Heil pictures, they did actually choose the one from 1971. Isn't that lovely? So there we are again. And I'm in front of Reverend Binstock. For those of you that don't remember Reverend Binstock and Cantor Rothstein, Reverend Rothstein. So Rabbi Harris, Binstock and Rothstein are the 3 gentlemen. And I'm in front of Binstock. Then there's, oh goodness, Leslie Grossman between me, and then Anna Deborah, who's in front of Rabbi Harris. And Anna Deborah was a very good friend of mine for many, many years. She went on Aliyah immediately after A-levels, and so I used to have to see her in Israel. Then she came back to England. She's sadly not at all well. But yeah, that was my Bat Heil. And there's the order of service. And I've got a bit of a problem, and I want to say this now. Look at that. Who did the sub-editing in 1971? What's with the commas? And also, why does Paula, who's here tonight, have a full stop after her surname? And why does Jane Shreya have a comma when she's at the end of the line? Anyway, sorry, I was a sub-editor for a time, and these kind of things just jump out at me. But you know what? Maybe it was a 1971 style. And look at that, everybody. Very fascinating. And it says graduates. Graduates recite the first. A graduate reads, a graduate. The only graduates who read anything were those who got distinction. I was very lucky. Anna Deborah got distinction. She read something. And I read the 23rd Psalm because I got a distinction in my exam as well. Lucky old me. We got a siddur. I want you to know how well used that is. Oh goodness, and you get a certificate as well. Another certificate. There it says with distinction. That's why I was allowed to say something in the service. And then we move on to the next year's Butt Heil, and it's almost exactly the same, except we don't have page numbers in parentheses because we're now all using the new version of the Singer's Prayer Book. So this was a very important transitional period, 71 to 72. And who was getting Butt Heiled in 72? Well, there it is. It all looks exactly the same. So you have to be very careful. But note, Rabbi Harris has gone. Rabbi Harris went early 72. So by 1972's Butt Heil, he had already gone. But we've got Reverend Brazil, but we've still got Binstock. And here we have it. Cherry Cornell. Cherry I met when we were doing our junior 1970, and Betsy Jane Kolsky, of course, is my sister. And Betsy, look at that. They didn't get my sister's name right. So Bets, there you are. For you, you've got your name finally correct on your Butt Heil, whatever. Rosanna Stone, Betsy's recently met up again through Facebook, and they've become really good friends again. And of course, Elaine Pizer, who was part of our childhood. And there is the 1972 class. You've got Cherry Cornell over to the far left, and then I think you've got Jane Curtis next to her, and then you've got my sister in the middle. Judith Levy next to my sister, and Cherry's now very friendly with Judith's sister Jackie, and then on the end Rosanna Stone, who Betsy's now very friendly with, and Elaine at the front. I mean, everybody knows everybody. And then the teacher is that aforementioned wonderful Gwen Jaffe, who teacher par excellence. And this was us going off. Now, this is a classic 1972 picture. I mean, what were we wearing? I mean, honestly, really, because we were very friendly with the Pizers, with the my mother, whose outfit I just have to gloss over. I don't know how Daddy allowed her to go out of the house like that, but there you are. What is Mummy wearing? But Betsy's dress I loved. I coveted my sister's Butt Heil dress. I think it's gorgeous. And then we've got Auntie Jean with her first husband, Uncle Cyril, who sadly died very young, with Elaine and Ian. And of course, Auntie Jean, they were just part of our lives. They lived up the road to us in Kingsfield Drive. And for Kenton Shaw, it's very impossible to imagine Kenton Shaw without Auntie Jean. She ran the kindergarten. She was a brilliant entertainer. She was in all the shows, and she's just fabulous. And then what were we wearing in 70s? Loons. And the reason I've put in this picture, these loons were for sale on eBay. And there's Cherry and me in our loons. And look what Cherry's wearing. They're the loons that were on sale on eBay. I mean, unbelievable. Cherry, I didn't really, I don't know if Cherry's here, she's watching Strictly. Cherry, I didn't know you were selling your loons on eBay. What else from the 70s? Dry shampoo, really important. Mark Bolan, really important. Platform shoes, really important. And I want you to know, everybody, I cut this out of a magazine in the early 1970s because I liked this cartoon, and I have kept it waiting for somebody like David to ask me to talk about the 70s. I just love that. It seems like only yesterday you were only knee-high. Wait a second, it was yesterday. And just again, a few things from Kenton. Dr. Goldenberg's surgery, if anybody had Dr. Goldenberg as on Kenton Road as a dentist. And I found this. I go to, honestly, I've spent the whole last month just looking for stuff. That house was turned into a dentist in 1956, which would make sense because we were going to Dr. Goldenberg's in the 1960s. It's still a dentist. We went to Dr. Ashkin's in Kingsbury, even though we'd moved to Kenton because Mummy and Daddy had used Dr. Ashkin when they lived in Kingsbury. As from 1961, Mummy had obviously kept that, and it's now Willow Tree. It's still Willow Tree, but new building. That was our dentist and our doctor. And then in 1972, 4 14-year-old girls needed to earn some money during the summer holidays, and so Vicky Friedman, Cherry Cornell, Laura Buttman, and Rachel Kolsky, we put notices. We leafleted Kenton and said we will do work for 25p an hour. We actually got quite a lot of work. I got all the ironing because I loved it. And who was my first ironing client? Rabbi and Robertson Jackson. They had just arrived in Kenton, and I did their ironing. So the first thing I ever knew about Rabbi Jackson was his underpants, and I'm not joking. I had to iron his underpants. But there you are. It was a nice introduction to them and their home, I guess you could say. So we were very what's the word? Entrepreneurial as young people in Kenton. And we were always collecting money, Jewish Child's Day, trees, more certificates, more badges. And we had a Kenton Building Aid Society, if anybody remembers that. And one of the ways they raised money for the Kenton Building Aid Society was the football pools. And my Sunday morning job, I don't know, was I not at Cheder? Was it the time I wasn't at Cheder? I don't know. I used to go around the members doing the football pools for Kenton, collecting the money. I mean, I was a teenager. I knocked on the door. They gave me cash, and I wandered around the streets collecting cash and then taking it home, and then mummy and daddy taking it to the shul. I mean, what were we thinking of? I mean, I've got absolutely no idea, but that's what I did. And I earned a little bit of pocket money doing that for the shul. And then come back to beloved Auntie Jean. You know what, if you don't know Auntie Jean Pizer, now Spellman, you know, Auntie Jean is one of the most special people ever. And she set up something called Cook and Serve with, I think it was Barbara Bennett and Pat Landau as caterers. And I did waitressing for them and ran their kitchen sometimes because I'm very good in a kitchen. I just know how to organize a kitchen. And we got little badges saying Cook and Serve with my name. And that was also to help me when I was a student. I did that, and that's what I looked like, because we had to wear a white top and a black skirt. They were very, very strict. Did anybody go to a Cook and Serve catered thing? Maybe, maybe not. You're muted. You're not going to tell me. And then, still shul, the United Synagogue had this brilliant idea of going to Norwich in March for a Shabbat in 1974. And here we are with Anna Deborah again, Sonia Daniels, who was Anna Deborah's cousin, Mike Goodman, who I think was related to the Gams, the butcher, Cherry, of course, and Susan Isaacs. And this is a photograph. I'd be really grateful if people could tell me who everybody is. There's Susan Isaacs, Sonia Daniels, me, Cherry, I think Linda Etherton, one of the Kalmans, and Jeffrey Blumenfeld. I haven't got a clue who anybody else is. I think somebody's one of them's the coach driver. If anybody knows who anybody is on that photograph, I'd be really grateful, because I don't know any of the names apart from the ones that I've told you. So this was a really nice thing run by the United Synagogue to give us a Shabbat away. In 1974, I went on a young Jewish National Fund holiday in Wales, which was really nice. And that was Danny Boxer was there, who's brother of Debbie Boxer, who was. My sister had more fun though. She used to go to the London Board of Jewish Religious Education summer schemes at Hawkhurst in Kent. She was very naughty. And not only was she always very naughty, she actually demanded to go to both 2-week sessions. You weren't allowed to. You could go to 1 2-week session because there was a big demand. But she went on and on and on about going. And in the end, they gave in and let her go to both 2-week sessions, which was great for mummy and daddy because we had a month without her. And secondly, she was very sociable, not like me. I was very much behind the scenes, very quiet, very studious. You know, I kept myself to myself. But Betsy was the life and soul of all the party. So actually, London Board of Jewish Religious Education was really happy for her to be there because she got things going and was fun. We did a lot of discos in the 70s, a lot of discos. This is not at Kenton Jewish Youth Club. We used to get bussed over to Northwood. Did anybody go to Kenton Shul on a Sunday night, get on the coach, we get bussed to Northwood, have a bop, and then get bussed back to get picked up? I mean, I don't know. Anyway, that was us not dance. That's not us dancing, but we did a lot of dancing. I was in love with Mark Bolan. Metal Guru for me is the great song of 1972, and only Mark Bolan can sing it. And for me, that just epitomizes for me the Kenton dances that I went to. I hear Metal Guru and I'm 14 at a Kenton disco. But there was lots of sports days. Now, this is hysterical. I don't know why I've got these. I don't do sports. I don't run. I don't jump for anybody. I just don't do it. I don't do anything that involves exertion. But I seem to go to a lot of sports days. And there were lots of these inter-cheder sports. I'm just going to run through these because you might recognize some names. You've got to look at the sea. Nigel Presky, Howard Presky, Karen Franks. You're going to remember David Grayson, Mickey Cowan. You know, some of these. If anybody wants a copy of this, I can send you all the photographs if these are your friends that you remember. In 1971, we were still doing sports days. And you got Ian Franks, Anita Silver, who I remember, Laura Buttman, who I was but Hiled with, Jonathan Kay, Edward Sheridan, Rachel Franks, Gina Leboff, David Grayson, Clive Grayson. Anita Silver was very, very, she was a very good athlete. I mean, I remember her, and she was very pretty as well, I remember. Very, very good athlete. So for some of you, these will be blasts from the past. But look at this, it's a knockout. This was an idea of the Hendon Cheder. And I don't know if any of you remember going, but here are the teams: Kenton, Golders Green, Henton, Finchley, Mill Hill, Wembley. Here are all the names. Some of you will remember some of them, some not. And look at what happened. Who won? Kenton won. And not only did Kenton win the Intercheder, it's a knockout, it made the Harrow Observer in 1971. But look what they did. They list everybody in the winning team with their full postal address. I mean, what about data protection? Gracious me. Now, my sister is in the front. She's a member of the winning team. She's in the front row in the middle next to Anita Silver and Shelley Peters. And on her bookshelf in Swindon, in Shrivenham, outside Swindon, is the It's a Knockout 1971 Winners' Cup. So isn't that amazing? I think, honestly, really, that's going to go for 100 grand minimum on eBay, because I'm not sure there's any more of these that are in existence. AJY, Association of Jewish Youth, we're doing Festival of Sport. This is from Karen Flam. I didn't go. That's far too serious. Kenton Youth Club was really important sports-wise, but as I said to you, that's another story. You've got to speak to people like the Feldmans for that if you want the story about sport. But we used to go to all these showbiz things to collect, to raise money for charity and to collect autographs. And then just to round up, a few favourite shops. Sainsbury's. This is the new Sainsbury's on Kenton Road, but a lot of us remember the old Sainsbury's. Everybody remembers Big D, Pepe Harris, Gams. The only reason I remember Slipman is because as you came down the Kenton Road and went into Kingsbury, Slipman was sort of when you knew you'd reached Kingsbury, you sort of left Kenton and reached Kingsbury. This is a photograph from your book, because you've got Parkway, arrived in Preston Road in '68, Big D, of course, Kelman's Kosher Butchers, you know, many names from the past now. Whose mothers didn't buy their clothes from a storer? I mean, didn't everybody buy their clothes from a storer with a Wordsworth phone number? And of course, Goodies. Why I've got this bag in my archive of life, I've got no idea. But Goodies was a kosher, Heshed delicatessen that arrived on Kenton Road, and we thought it was absolutely fabulous. Run by Mr. David, who did banqueting, who actually I did some banqueting for at Quaglino's. Yes, yeah, actually that's the 80s, so I can't talk about that now. And I went to the cinema. This was the ABC, now being renovated in Harrow Wealdstone. I went to the Granada as well. I started going to football more in the 1970s. I was moving away after I'd done all that cheder and I'd won all those prizes and I'd got all my certificates and all this kind of stuff. I really wanted to do more of what I wanted to do. So this was my display at the Jewish Museum. If anybody went to the exhibition at the Jewish Museum about Jews and football, I had my own display, the Rachel Kolsky display, about Man United and Willie Morgan. More of that another time. I was a member of what do you call it? A charity commission called not commission. What do you call it? Organisation called Kojak. Kojak was a TV program, and it stands for something like Kenton Organisation for Jewish Association for Charity. I don't know. Somebody might remember it. And this was one of our first fundraising events at Northwick Circle. Would that have been the Glinnett's house? I don't know, maybe, I don't know. But then a year or so later, we got really upmarket and we had to do at Hillel House in Ensley Street, £1.30 we were asking people for. In 1976, we were teenagers, you know, we were still at school, we hadn't done our A-levels. Yeah, so again, entrepreneurship, even Kenton really was buzzing. There was nothing we didn't think we could do. And then, I don't know, you leave cheder, you've done your A-levels. I started interrailing. I did interrailing 3 times in '76, just before going to college, 78 and 79. This is me and Karen in 7. And the reason I'm telling you this is because the 3 people I interrailed with are still friends of mine. Or let's put it this way, they're still talking to me, because sometimes you can go away with people and like you just never want to see them ever again, or they never want to see you again. But miraculously, my 3 interrail pals still allow me to be in communication with them, which I think is rather fabulous. So Karen's a school friend, that was 76. I went to college and met Katya. So this is my NUS card from 1976, and that's Katya and me at our graduation in 1979. People used to think we were sisters. I couldn't work out, you know, why we were there. And that was us interrailing in 1978. And people used to call me Katya and Katya Rachel, but we've moved on. We can cope. And that's me and Cherry in 1979 on our interrail trip. So we're coming right to the end really of my Kenton days, because after I graduated and came back to London, you know, you want to leave home. And once you leave home, you know, you stop going to your local shul, you go to different shuls. And I'm just going to end with Hermelis, because after I left college, I didn't apply for any work, and I needed work. And it was actually Kenton that got me this job at Hermelis, working for Mrs. Lisser. Oh my God. I mean, they've now got a much posher logo. Hermelis was Cardassia, it still is Cardassia. I learned more about catering in those few months I worked with Mrs. Lisser. She was amazing. I mean, she was bonkers, but she was amazing, and it was full on learning. And oh God, she was just fabulous. But the reason I got that job was actually because of Barbara Bennett. Barbara Bennett knew that I was okay in the kitchen. I loved being in the kitchen. I loved cooking. I worked with her for cook and serve, and she'd heard that Hermelis needed somebody to help, and it would help if they had somebody Jewish, because most of the workers at Hermelis weren't Jewish, and you needed people to light the oven, you needed people to pour the liqueur. And so Barbara Bennett told me about Hermelis and got me the job. So there we are. That was 1979. The next, in January 1980, I started work. Very soon after that, I moved out of my home and moved away from Kenton. So Kenton really wrapped up my 1970s for me by getting me my first job after graduating. And as I say, into the 1980s we go. Thank you, Kenton, for all the memories. And thank you for inviting me along. And thank you, everybody, for coming and sticking with me. So there you go. Keep, and also everybody, let me just take this opportunity to say keep well, because at the moment that is the key thing, to keep well. So there you go.
Well, you know, follow that. After that, whistle-stop tour during the 70s from the Kenton point of view. And as you were talking, Rachel, you may have not have noticed, but messages are coming in.
And I haven't seen at all. I'm talking. Yeah.
That's my mum, or I'm next to you, or I was in your class, or she was somewhere else. Before I invite other people to join, I just want to ask you a question. This teacher of yours, this Gwendolyn Jaffe, yeah?
Well, to us, she was just Gwen.
She's from Manchester.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to school with her. Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. Because when I went to Manchester, Terry Jaffe is a contemporary of mine at Manchester, and Terry actually is a friend of Cherry's in Hendon. So I was taught by Gwen. I met Terry in Manchester, and Cherry is friendly with Terry. So
Gwendolyn, as I knew her, I knew her in B'nai Akiva, and we went to the same school, so I wasn't aware that she was had anything whatsoever to do with Kenton. So you live and you know. Anyway, there are people online on the call here who know far more about Kenton than most of us. So, can we ask for contributions?
Oh look, Hilary Hurwitz knew about Dave Krasner. Oh Hilary, yeah, but you went in our class, so you must have had him in a different class.
No, I'm older than you. I think I probably was one of his first.
Oh, that's Hilary Bennett. Oh, that's my God, Monty Bennett. Yeah. Oh, Hilary. Oh, you're Hilary Bennett. So, Hilary, you used to work at Cook and Serve, didn't you? I don't know where.
Of course I did.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You haven't got a face. I mean, you're just a rectangle.
Oh,
yeah.
So, sorry. So not your very presentable this evening. It's already 11 o'clock here.
Yeah. No, your mum got me the job at Hermelis, so that was a big thank you, because I learned so much from Mrs. Lisser. I mean, she was Hungarian, and don't get me started. Don't get me started talking about food, because and oh yes, Hilary, you had dead cousins. Oh, I'm glad about that. And then I've got Marlene,